So are people moving closer to or farther away from beneficial communication?
Well, it depends what point of view you have, because a lot of people believe that virtual communication is beneficial. I don't subscribe to that view, particularly when it comes to building relationships. I think it's difficult to build relationships, solid, long-lasting, harmonious relationships on Facebook or with Twitter, if all you have is 40 characters to build them on. And
what about texting?
Even texting. I just feel that that's an adjunct to building a relationship, but ultimately the relationship is built on a face-to-face basis and a person-to-person basis.
Some of those things say, books say culture shock, which I think is a term that came into the language not really that long ago.
In the 60s.
Yeah,
yeah, it was coined in about 1962.
How accurate is that term?
Very accurate. It's like a sickness. It's been scientifically proven that virtually everybody experiences culture shock when they go into a different, especially a different national environment to their own, and especially when they're away from their home and away from the things that are familiar to them. Everybody suffers from it. And part of the process of my seminars, when I'm delivering them to people who are going into different cultures, is how they deal with culture shock as a sickness. And we've developed again a very simple strategy for dealing with it. Well, we call it a 12-step program, actually, and it's to do with, firstly, how you prepare to go away from your family and friends. And it's much easier now to technically stay in touch with them, but they have to actively stay in touch with them, and they have to make a strategy to do that, because people won't automatically stay in touch with them. They have to stay in touch with the people they've left behind. And they've got to do that proactively. They've got to proactively take things with them that are familiar to them, and don't alienate. Well, you know, I mean, most people say, yes, we'll always take books or photographs or things like that, but I've made people take kitchen tables away with them before, because that's the place the family sits, and it's something familiar. Yeah, so you really have to take things that are familiar to you.
How about a good friend?
Yes, if you get that opportunity, definitely, definitely.
I have some places I want to go. Will you come with me?
Well, the point about it is that you should keep things that are familiar around you if you can, and that's one aspect. And the other aspect is to pace yourself, because most people, when they go into a new environment, start off very energetically, too energetically, and then they wind themselves down and get exhausted. Then they can't cope with the environment they're in because it's strange to them. So they then feel isolated and helpless, and they go into little sort of dips and troughs until they sort of level out. And that takes a while, and people have to be prepared for it, and they've got to work at it. They also have to be prepared for returning, and that's something that most organizations don't strategize, and that is, how do you prepare for your return into your own culture? Because a lot of people feel that it's not going to be a problem, and sometimes it's a bigger problem than culture shock. So we give them a strategy for that too. No, not yet, no.
Close it.
Okay, we've got 10 minutes.
Oh, okay. I would think that you would be aware of going into another country of culture shock, but there are much more subtle things, like going into a new job.
Yes, absolutely.
When people don't think so much about that.
Yes, absolutely. And that is, again, that's why I say that when I talk about culture, it really is just going into a different environment, which may not be a foreign environment. The only difference about going into a new job is if you're still in your own culture, you have the benefit of going back home and going back into your familiar surroundings, having friends and family around you. So that's a compensation for it.
I don't need to take my kitchen table to my new cubicle.
No, I don't think so. I don't think you'd need to, David.
How did you get interested in this? How did this happen?
Well, I would guess it really happened because I traveled a lot and because I lived abroad a lot. Most of my life, from the age of about 17 onwards, was lived abroad. and I've lived in many different cultures.
How many, do you have any
I've lived in 5 cultures, but I've travelled, you know, extensively around the world. And I love travelling, and I love meeting new people and seeing new places, and generally being, I've sort of developed by osmosis a way of being very interested in people and places. And I guess the benefits that I got out of it, combined with my background in behavioral psychology and in psychotherapy and in business, and combining all those things, I suddenly hit upon something which I'm a bit passionate about and I enjoy doing.
When? How long ago?
Well, it
When
really...
did you start realizing, oh, I know something that I can apply?
About, I would say probably about 20 years ago. Because I was living abroad and dealing with all the things that I'm dealing with now.
And was it mostly out of your own experience, or beginning to notice other problems other people were having?
The latter, the latter. It started with my own experience, but then I started realizing that most people have some issue with dealing with another culture. Nowadays, and and increasingly, people are having to interact with different cultural backgrounds, even without moving from their chair or their kitchen table. They're just, you know, we're just exposed so much in our communications nowadays with the whole world. It's a global village now. So I think all of these skills are useful ones for people, for everybody. I'd recommend this to everybody.
What you call your business Culture Smart, that's on your card.
Yeah, I feel that you've got to be smart and be aware of different cultures. But I don't think it's difficult to be smart. I think it's quite, fundamentally, it's quite easy to be smart. You've just got to use the tools.